I built the company's spine while they slept, but they treated me like old furniture. So when the new COO tried to sell my life's work, I didn't yell. I just pulled one specific file from my drawer and watched their multi-million-dollar deal turn to dust. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was standing exactly 5 feet away, clutching the briefing packet against my chest like a shield when the new COO walked in. Julian Vane didn't just enter a room, he annexed it. He wore a navy blazer that cost more than my first car, his teeth were blindingly white, and he spoke with that polished, bass-heavy podcast voice that suggests absolute confidence regardless of competence. He was the kind of guy who calls a catastrophic server failure a growth opportunity, and refers to firing people as right-sizing the vessel. He made the rounds with the practiced ease of a senator running for re-election. He shook hands with the junior marketing staff, clapped the backs of the sales team, and even remembered the name of the receptionist's golden retriever. I stood right there, my arm half lifted, ready for the professional courtesy of a handshake. He glanced over me like I was holding a mop. I wasn't the lead architect or the man who built the tech stack he was about to reorganize. To him, I was furniture. I didn't even get a handshake, just a lazy, dismissive nod, the kind you give someone in a hallway when you are desperately hoping they won't stop to talk to you. That nod burned. It burned physically, a hot flush of shame crawling up my neck, because 5 years ago, this company wasn't a glass-walled office in the city. It was 4 of us in a busted-up warehouse in Tempe with no heat, bad coffee, and 0 guardrails. I was the fixer. I was the one who handled the vendor contracts at 3:00 a.m. I wrote the first compliance rules from scratch because we couldn't afford outside counsel. I rewrote the corporate bylaws 2 weeks before we were set to implode. When the engineers broke the product with spaghetti code, I was the translator who turned their mess into something real-world clients could actually use. I never wanted the spotlight. I was happy being the skeleton that held the meat together. They used to call me the ghost in the machine. But now the machine had a new pilot, and apparently ghosts don't need introductions. Julian kept smiling and schmoozing, and I stood there with that briefing packet looking like an intern who had wandered into the wrong boardroom. Then he said it, he turned to the room, beaming, and announced, "Glad to be here. I can't wait to streamline our core redundancies." My stomach dropped through the floor. Streamline redundancies. That was code. That was corporate speak for gut the place with a smile. And I already knew where the knife was going to land. Julian turned to the founder, Ben, my old friend, the guy who used to text me at 2:00 a.m. in a panic when the servers crashed, and said, "We're going to run this place like a machine." Ben didn't look at me, he just nodded along with the rest of them. I stood still, packet in hand, watching everyone else nod like bobbleheads while the walls started closing in. I wasn't just invisible anymore, I was already gone. I dropped the packet on the table, harder than I intended, the thud echoing for a second too long, and walked out of the room. I walked back to my desk, the echo of that streamlined comment bouncing around my skull like a loose bearing. I sat down and opened my laptop, trying to focus on the vendor dashboard I had maintained for the last 4 years. 10 minutes later, the screen flickered. A red error box popped up, blinking like a silent fire alarm, access DENIED, contact administrator. Then the office got quiet, not the usual Thursday morning quiet where people pretend to work while scrolling news feeds. This was the "we heard something is happening" quiet. Eyes were darting over monitors, keyboards paused. I refreshed my Slack window and realized my sidebar had shrunk, half the channels I ran gone, the compliance alerts channel I built from scratch archived. I messaged it nothing. Then HR pinged me. "Let's schedule a quick sync tomorrow to discuss your role shift and any questions you may have." Role shift. The euphemisms were coming fast now. That night I was boot-kicked from 2 more systems I had architected. One of them still had my initials in the file paths. The next morning I came in to find my desk gone. It wasn't in my usual row by the product team anymore. They had moved my personal effects, my framed photo of my dog, my lucky stapler, my notebooks, to a solitary desk shoved into the corner by the breakroom fridge. No explanation. My nameplate was gone. In its place was a yellow sticky note W. With the word Stanley scrawled on it in Sharpie. I wasn't Stanley. I sat down, the humiliation sitting heavy in my chest. No one made eye contact. People I had trained, people who had shadowed me through 12-hour coding sprints and asked me how to decode audit logs, suddenly acted like I didn't exist. One of the senior devs actually turned and walked the other way when I stood up to get water. Even worse was Ben, The founder stopped replying to my messages entirely. We used to joke about launch day disasters over beers. Now I couldn't get a one-word answer out of him. I realized then that I wasn't fired. That would have triggered compliance red flags, severance packages, and legal paperwork. No, I was being reclassified. They were trying to make me quit. They wanted me to get angry, flip a table, and storm out so they wouldn't owe me a dime. I sat by the fridge, listening to the compressor wheeze like an old smoker every time someone grabbed a Diet Coke. I heard the microwave slam shut 100 times a day. But as I sat there, ignored and isolated, a cold resolve settled over me. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought taking away my admin access and my desk meant I was powerless. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one who filed the paperwork. I was the one who wrote the patents during my lunch breaks. And while they were busy changing passwords, they forgot to check who actually owned the keys to the kingdom. The indignity wasn't just about the desk. It was about the years of life I had poured into this place. I remembered the nights I slept on a folding chair in the server room because we couldn't afford an automated monitoring service. I remembered missing my nephew's baptism because the payment gateway crashed, and I was the only one who understood the API documentation. I wasn't just an employee, I was the mortar between the bricks. But Julian Vane didn't care about mortar, he only cared about the facade. 2 days after the fridge incident, I watched them hire Taylor. She showed up with a fresh MBA, spotless white sneakers, and a lanyard that still had the plastic tag on it. According to the HR intro slide that flashed on the main monitors, Taylor was 27 years old, her title, Operations Systems Lead. It was my old title, rewritten in font size 16, like it was something brand new. She walked over to my exile corner holding a notebook with pastel-colored tabs and said, "Hey, I'm supposed to shadow you for a couple of weeks. Julian said you're the expert on the legacy system." Legacy, that's what they were calling my life's work now. I gave a stiff nod, sure, pull up a chair. She opened her laptop like it was an unwrapped present. "Wow, this system is complex," she chirped. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice flat, "I built it." She smiled politely, waiting for me to start explaining. She didn't get it. She didn't understand that "I built it" wasn't a brag, it was a warning. The next hour was torture. I tried to keep my tone steady while she typed everything I said like it was gospel, even the filler words. I walked her through the logic trees, the compliance routing, and the naming conventions that took me months to clean up after Ben's early coding mess. Every few minutes she'd stop and ask, "So what happens if I just delete that part? It looks messy." "You trigger an alert that locks out finance for the day," I said. She laughed, a light, airy sound. "You're funny, like that would really happen." By the fifth explanation, I realized she didn't understand how fragile the system was, how it was all duct-taped together under pressure. And then, the darker realization hit me, she didn't have to understand it. She wasn't here to learn, she was here to replace. Julian stopped by halfway through the session. He leaned over her shoulder, ignoring me entirely. "How's the onboarding going, Taylor?" "Great," she said, beaming, "just trying to wrap my head around all this logic." Julian looked at me then, a smug, patronizing look that said play nice or else. "Glad to hear it. Taylor is going to bring some much-needed energy to this department." When he left, she whispered to me, "He's so inspiring, right? I love how he talks about efficiency and culture." "Sure," I said, staring at my screen, "real inspiring." She was all over Slack that week, posting motivational quotes and photos of coffee mugs that said things like "rise and grind." Management loved her energy. "Fresh eyes," they called it. Meanwhile, she crashed the audit system twice in 1 week and never even noticed. I had to quietly fix it from my own terminal before finance found out, just out of habit. She thanked me once. "You're such a lifesaver," she said, breezing past my desk. I smiled back, a tight, thin smile. "Yeah, that's kind of what I do." But inside, I was done saving them. They were wrapping Taylor in my old job like shrink wrap, shiny, flexible, and temporary. They thought the transition was over. They thought I was just a lingering ghost they could exorcise with boredom. They had no idea that while they were planning the future, I was quietly downloading the past. It was almost 9:00 p.m. when I realized Taylor had left her laptop open. She had rushed out hours earlier for a Women in Tech mixer downtown, leaving her company-branded hoodie draped over the back of her chair and her screen unlocked. It was a rookie mistake, the kind that would have failed a basic security audit in the old days. But these weren't the old days. I walked past her desk on my way to the vending machine. The office was dead quiet, save for the hum of the server rack in the closet and the lingering smell of burnt popcorn from some intern's dinner. I glanced at her screen. She was still logged into the shared drive. More importantly, she was logged into the admin portal, the one I used to control, the one they had locked me out of. I didn't plan it, I didn't wring my hands or cackle like a villain. I just sat down in her chair. My heart was hammering against my ribs not from fear but from a sudden crystalline clarity. I navigated to the root directory. I started downloading every specification document I had ever written, every version history, internal patent drafts, back-end schemas, legal notes I'd filed and forgotten about years ago. I found the audit logs with my initials, ET, stamped on every major code change from 2018 to present. I wasn't doing this to burn the place down. This wasn't revenge, not yet. It was insurance. It was something to keep in my pocket before they erased me completely. I transferred it all to an encrypted folder, labeled it with the date, and backed it up twice, once locally, once to a private off-site cloud storage. Quiet, clean, no footprints. I wiped the recent activity log on her machine, stood up, and walked out of the office like nothing had happened. A week later, the first domino fell. I received an email on my personal account, a legacy alias that forwarded to my main inbox. The subject line read, "Follow-up on IP involvement/Tito acquisition." It was from a legal team representing the company trying to buy us out. A big, shark-like firm out of Chicago. They wanted clarification on an old patent listed in the acquisition packet. Something didn't line up for them. They had found my name listed as co-inventor on a document, but my name wasn't on the list of equity holders or key leadership. I opened the attached document. Sure enough, there was my signature dated 3 years ago. I remembered writing that first draft during a layover in Dallas, half asleep with a flat Coke, trying to save the company from a lawsuit. I didn't panic, I replied simply. I attached the original source file from my backup, confirmed the signature was mine, and hit send. The next day, another email came, then another. Over 40 filings had my name on them. Some listed me as the sole author. The buyer's lawyers weren't stupid. They saw the pattern. They started asking the real questions. Why isn't Mr. Thorne in the leadership chain? Why are his patents being claimed by people who hadn't even been hired when they were filed? I didn't answer those questions, not because I didn't have an answer, but because silence was louder. Let them squirm, let them panic. I watched the chaos unfold from my desk by the fridge. Legal started CCing more people on the threads. Someone in compliance got looped in, then Ben, and finally Julian. They tried to get ahead of it. I could tell by the rushed calendar invites and sudden check-ins that popped up on my schedule. "Quick sync," Julian messaged. "Coffee run," Ben texted for the first time in months. I declined all of them. No one could figure out how I still had access to the full filing index. They didn't know I had the insurance file. By Friday, Taylor stopped showing up to our handoff sessions. Julian sent a Slack message to the general channel, "Let's regroup next week. Appreciate everyone's focus during this transition." I didn't reply. Instead, I accessed the shared drive one last time through a backdoor script I'd written 5 years ago, a maintenance tool I kept for emergencies. I uploaded one more document to the acquisition folder, the original draft of our IP framework. It included my edits, my timestamp notes, and my blood in every line. Let them call their lawyers. Let them explain to the buyer how their invisible workhorse actually owned the blueprints to the factory they were trying to sell. I wasn't trying to make noise, I just wanted to remind them that I was still here. And suddenly, they started listening. By Monday, the whispers started. You could feel it before you heard it, the sudden hush when I walked into the kitchen, the furious clicking of keyboards that stopped the moment I passed someone's desk. Something was wrong and everyone knew it. Legal was in lockdown mode, their F5's lights stayed on past midnight. Julian Vane, the man who shook everyone's hand but mine, had gone from strutting to pacing. He'd always been loud in meetings, full of buzzwords about synergy and velocity. Now he just muttered to himself, checking his phone every 5 minutes like he was waiting for a stay of execution. Word spread through the grapevine. The acquisition lawyers had started poking holes in our IP trail, and those holes led straight to the man sitting next to the refrigerator. By Wednesday, a thick white binder appeared on the general counsel's desk. I caught a glimpse of it when the paralegal dropped it off. Big block letters across the cover read, "Internal IP Review." I saw my name showing up again and again on the protruding tabs like it was daring someone to look closer. At noon, I got the summons. Conference room C, bring your badge. The glass-walled room overlooked the parking lot. HR was there, the general counsel. Julian sat at the head of the table and Ben, the founder, my old friend, sat in the corner with his laptop closed. It was the first time I'd seen Ben look small. Julian started with his politician smile, though it looked strained at the edges. Elias, thanks for coming in. We just need to clear up a few documentation inconsistencies before the audit closes. The general counsel slid a single sheet of paper across the table. We're conducting an internal verification of inventorship records. We'd appreciate your cooperation to confirm your role was supportive, not contributory. Supportive, that was cute. I looked at the form. It was a simple waiver. One line to sign saying I hadn't authored or co-authored any critical filings. A quick signature and they could move on with their shiny merger and I would be erased forever. I looked at the paper, then I reached into my leather satchel. Slowly, deliberately, I slid out my own stack, printed copies of the original patent filings, my signature at the bottom of every single one, dates, revision logs, legal annotations, irrefutable proof. I pushed them across the table until they covered their waiver completely. Actually, I said, my voice calm, contrasting the hurricane regarding to start in their heads. I wasn't support, I was the source. HR looked confused, legal looked sick, Julian went pale. I watched Ben's jaw tighten. He knew the truth. He'd been there for half of those filings, he just didn't think I'd kept the receipts. Legal cleared her throat, her voice trembling. We'll need to pause this conversation. She looked at Julian. Effective immediately, the buyer has requested a hold on the transaction until ownership can be verified. The room froze. You could almost hear the air conditioning hum shift. Julian leaned forward, his podcast voice sharp and nasty now. You don't understand what's at stake here, Elias. You're jeopardizing months of work. You're putting everyone's payout at risk. I met his eyes. Then maybe you should have read the filings before you tried to streamline me out of existence. He didn't answer. He just stared, gray around the edges like someone had pulled the plug on his confidence. Legal gathered the papers quietly, stacking them on top of the binder. We'll be in touch. I stood up, no yelling, no victory speech. I just pushed my chair in and walked out through the glass door where everyone in the hallway could see. I walked back to my desk, knowing that I had just dropped a bomb in the center of their boardroom and the explosion was just beginning. By the time I reached my desk, my inbox had already exploded. HR follow-ups, meeting cancellations, new invites from people who hadn't spoken to me in months, and there it was again, that same hush in the office. Only this time it wasn't about gossip. It was about fear. The ghost in the machine had finally spoken and the system was listening. The next morning I got pulled into the room, not the glass-walled fishbowl from yesterday. This was the executive boardroom, closed door, carpeted, soundproofed, the kind of room where bad news gets delivered behind a smile. Inside sat the founder, the VP of compliance, two frantic-looking litigators from our side, and one man I didn't recognize in a navy suit. No laptop, just a leather folder and a dead stare. This is James Klein, our legal counsel said, her voice tight. He represents the buyer. No small talk, no handshake, just a gesture to a seat and a stack of printed emails in the middle of the table. The VP cleared his throat. Thanks for coming, Elias. There's been some confusion around a few filings from the early days. We believe it may be a clerical issue. Klein cut him off without blinking. We're not here for speculation. We're here to clarify inventorship and ownership. The deal doesn't close until we do. They all looked at me. So I opened my folder, the same one from yesterday, now organized with color-coded tabs and highlights. I laid out the pate. NTS walked them through version histories, change logs, and architecture schematics. Every single point tied back to me, draft notes, early system logic, source builds. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Every sentence landed like a punch. I wrote the middleware stack that powers your entire reporting engine, I said, sliding a document forward. That filing, I hand-delivered the draft to legal in 2021 after finance botched the rollout. That one built on my schema, this one sole-authored. Klein flipped through his own binder comparing notes, then he looked at Ben. Is there a signed work for hire agreement covering these specific pre-incorporation assets? Klein asked. A silence. The VP shifted in his chair. Legal started frantically checking their laptop. Ben didn't answer right away. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked right at me, really seeing me for the first time in 2 years. There should have been one, Ben said quietly. I don't know if we ever formalized it, we were moving fast. Klein didn't react, he simply closed his folder. Then until ownership is verified, we're halting the transaction. He turned to me. We'll need you to validate which portions you authored and under what terms. I already have, I said. I slid over a printed index with my initials next to each section. But I'll do it again if you want it in a format your analysts prefer. Ben leaned forward, his face pale. You built the core system. I nodded. I built the system. You just called it something else on the investor slides. He looked like someone had pulled the bottom card from the stack. Klein stood up. We'll reconvene once ownership is clear. The room emptied in a matter of seconds. No eye contact. Ben stayed seated, staring down at the paperwork like it was written in a dead language. I waited. You kept everything, he finally asked. Every version. He nodded once. No apology, no excuses, just a nod like he knew this day was coming and hoped it wouldn't. I left him sitting there. Down the hall, a couple of execs were whispering. Someone from HR turned to speak to me, then didn't. I walked past like I wasn't even part of the company anymore. Because technically, until someone sorted out that IP chain, I wasn't just an employee. I was the gate, and for now, the deal didn't move unless I opened it. The board met that night. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be because I knew exactly what they were discussing and, more importantly, what they were scrambling to fix. The next morning, Ben showed up at my desk. No Slack message, no assistant, just the founder standing there like it was 5 years ago and we were still pulling all-nighters with vending machine coffee. We want you back on the leadership team, he said. I didn't move. Title: Chief Systems Officer. I looked up. Not interim, he added quickly. Full C-suite, we're making it official. He nodded once, implying the deal was done. And maybe it was because within the hour, Julian Vane's name vanished from Slack. His calendar went blank. His office door stayed shut the rest of the day. Taylor got reassigned to documentation and knowledge transfer. The email said no more hoodie pep talks, no more legacy system jokes. She didn't come by to say goodbye and I didn't ask. HR sent me a packet before lunch. New contract, updated salary, leadership equity, and retroactive vesting. They called it a correction. I called it survival. They moved me out of my desk next to the fridge. I didn't even have to pack. I showed up and carried my stuff before noon. My new office was on the second floor, glass walls, private whiteboard, and a view of the loading dock. The same loading dock we used to haul servers into the warehouse when we were still begging for beta testers. By Thursday, the systems I built were no longer marked legacy. They were labeled strategic assets. My name was on every file again, this time in bold. People started coming to me with questions, not like before, not asking where a broken query lived or who to blame for a failed push. They came to me like I was the architect, like they finally understood where the walls came from. And I let them because I didn't burn the place down, I didn't leak files, I didn't call out names in a public forum, I simply let the truth surface. You can replace a title, but you can't replace the spine that holds the system together. The next Monday, the acquiring CEO flew in. This wasn't a quick check-in, this was the finalization meeting. I walked into the boardroom while the others were still settling in. No badge check, no waiting in the hall. The binder was already on the table, thick, worn, tagged with color-coded tabs. My name was highlighted across the cover like a brand. I didn't sit near the printer, I didn't hover by the wall. I walked straight to the head of the table and took the seat next to Ben. James Klein opened the meeting. Before we finalize, he said, turning toward me, we want clarity on technical authorship and future stewardship of the code base. He paused. He's the backbone. That was it, no buildup. The buyer knew who held the value. Ben sat across from me, hands folded, quiet. He didn't defend. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. I walked them through the filing tree one last time. I didn't pitch. I didn't sell. I explained because that's what I always did, even back when no one noticed. The meeting ended without applause, but with a quiet, earned respect. As everyone packed up, the CEO pulled me aside. We'd like you on the post-acquisition advisory board, he said. Permanent seat, voting rights. I didn't smile like I was grateful to be seen. I just said, okay. Because I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't leak documents or torch careers. I asked for recognition. And now they don't move a single server without asking the ghost in the machine first.